911 emergency. What are you reporting?
Oh my God, we got attacked.
Who attacked you?
I don't know.
Halloween is a night for fun scares, treats, and costume thrills. But sometimes, the world proves that poison candies and creepy tricks are not just merely some urban legends. In the darkness of October nights, some chose to turn this occasion into a scene of shocking crimes, with terrifying acts turning Halloween into a night of very real fear. From disturbing assaults to creepy encounters in costumes, these cases make us question just how safe we are when the masks come off. Let's get straight into the video and break down the top 5 most gory Halloween crimes ever caught on camera. On November 1st, 2004, what seemed like a peaceful Halloween evening turned into a nightmare in Napa, California. The usually quiet Dorset Street was rocked by an unimaginable tragedy as Adriana Michelle Insogna and her roommate Leslie Ann Mazzara were brutally murdered in their shared home. The case, later dubbed the Napa Halloween Murders, left a scar on a neighborhood. Adrienne, born December 30th, 1977, had roots in Calistoga, California, where she was raised by her parents, Arlene Allen and Tony Insogna, a well-loved student. She graduated from Calistoga High School in 1996 and went on to pursue civil engineering at California Polytechnic State University. By 2004, she had settled into Napa, working as an assistant engineer for the Napa Sanitation District and actively participating in community sports and charitable events. Leslie, her roommate, was a South Carolina beauty queen who had relocated to Napa to focus on her career with aspirations of a fresh start after a recent breakup.
There was blood everywhere. Adrienne just lying down next to her bed. She was alive still, but I could tell in her eyes she was gone. I had never really seen someone die before. To the right of Adrienne was Leslie lying face down in a pile of clothing.
The horrific incident occurred at 2 a.m. when loud noises and screams filled the home. Their third roommate, Lauren Mianza, awoke to the sounds of chaos, and in terror, she fled to the yard, hiding until she felt it was safe to return. What she found upon re-entering the house was horrifying. Leslie lay face down in a pool of blood, while Adrienne, critically injured, was barely clinging to life. Lauren's escape saved her life, and she became a key witness in the case. Months of investigations revealed little, with countless DNA samples tested before a clue finally surfaced: cigarette butts discarded outside the house. When police disclosed this evidence, Eric Koppel, a Napa resident and the husband of Adrienne's close friend, came forward. Koppel confessed to the killings, later claiming he had blacked out on the night of the murders. However, his attempt to erase evidence suggested otherwise. The calculated actions contradicted his claim of an impulsive, uncontrolled act. Eric Koppel was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole and is currently serving time in Pleasant Valley State Prison. As for Lauren, she has maintained a low profile, hoping to put the events of that fateful night behind her. The quiet neighborhood of Napa was never the same, with the memory of that Halloween night still haunting its residents nearly 2 decades later. If Napa's tragedy was harrowing, you cannot imagine the horrors that awaited Devin Griffin in Ohio. On Halloween morning, he walked inside the house to have breakfast with his loving family, only to find out that he will never have the chance again. On Halloween morning, October 31st, 2010, the quiet community of Oak Harbor, Ohio, was thrust into horror as 16-year-old Devin Griffin returned home after spending the night at his father's, expecting an ordinary day. Devin had plans to change his clothes for church, but he walked into a real-life nightmare.
They found a young man laying in bed with a gaping blunt force trauma wound to his head.
Entering his family's house, he was met with what he initially thought was a morbid Halloween prank, only to discover it was an all-too-real massacre. In the bedroom lay his mother, Susan Liska, and stepfather, William Bill Liska, brutally shot multiple times. Upstairs, Devin's older brother, Derek Griffin, lay dead from severe blunt force trauma to his head.
Grief affects people in very many different ways. To me, it was no different than if somebody had died of a natural cause. It was just the next step.
The Liska household, known for its seasonal celebrations, had gathered just the evening before for a small family get-together, which ended around midnight. Bill and his troubled son, 24-year-old William B.J. Liske, had spent the previous day hunting together, a rare bonding moment amid an extremely turbulent relationship between B.J. and his stepmother. According to Ottawa County Prosecutor Mark Mulligan,
This was probably the most disturbing murder scene that I'd seen over the course of my career.
the murder scene Devin discovered was one of the most disturbing in his career, with blood splatters covering the walls, making it unforgettable even years later. Investigators swiftly turned their focus to BJ, who was known for his mental health struggles and violent tendencies. Relations between him and Susan had long been strained. He had physically assaulted her in the past, and the tension had become so severe that he was no longer permitted to live at home. Detectives learned that Devin had seen BJ in the driveway, loading something into his father's truck before heading to church. Later that day, police located BJ at a family hunting cabin in Carroll County, finding evidence that included bloodstains and a .22 caliber rifle in his vehicle. Further investigation uncovered a bloody hammer hidden at the Lisk home, believed to have been used on Derek. In a chilling jailhouse phone call with his mother, BJ vaguely confessed, saying he wasn't in his right mind, then refused to discuss the matter further. He later changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 3 life terms without parole. In 2015, while serving time, BJ Liske took his own life, leaving behind a haunting legacy of violence and tragedy. For Devin, that Halloween morning remains a horrific memory that shattered his family in an instant. This case broke our hearts, but what comes next will make you question even more whether one can trust their very own families or not. This killer teen is not something you see every other day. On January 23rd, 2003, a 17-year-old from suburban Grand Rapids, John Seisling, was charged as an adult with the stabbing deaths of his mother and 2 younger sisters. He was arraigned on 3 counts of open murder and held without bail. Seisling called 911 on Wednesday to report the killings. He was arrested without incident shortly after he called. When officers arrived at their rented home, they discovered the bodies of 42-year-old Sharon Ruth Seisling and her daughters, 15-year-old Caitlin and 6-year-old Leah. Each victim had suffered multiple stab wounds, with Police Sergeant Greg Long stated that the bodies were found scattered throughout the house and not confined to one area. Authorities investigated the motive, noting Seisling had no prior juvenile criminal record. Michelle Greika, the homeowner, expressed disbelief at the tragedy, stating, "I cannot imagine what it was that made that boy snap." 20 years later, a resident named Amanda, who grew up in the house and is familiar with the tragedy, created a Halloween display that mimics crime scene elements, including gravestones, blood-like handprints, and a baseball bat on the porch. She explained that the display was her way of addressing local curiosity and raising awareness of the event's impact on her family. Although she asserted it provided closure for her daughter, others, including Kathy Gordon, a former classmate of Caitlin, found the display unsettling and disrespectful to the victims. Moving on, we have the most mysterious Halloween case on this list. It took years to decode the death of this woman. Chelsea Bruck, a 22-year-old woman from Maybe, Michigan, went missing after attending a large Halloween party in Monroe County's Frenchtown Township on October 26, 2014. Nearly 6 months later, her remains were discovered, and in 2016, DNA evidence linked Daniel Clay to the case, resulting in his arrest. The case gripped Michigan as prosecutors sought justice for Bruck's brutal death. The Halloween party, which drew over 600 attendees, was the last place Bruck was seen alive. Dressed as the Batman character Poison Ivy, she attended with friends but left alone, a decision that would prove tragic. After her disappearance, law enforcement launched an extensive search, but it wasn't until April 5th, 2015, that her homemade costume was found, torn and abandoned at a vacant industrial site in Flat Rock, Michigan. This discovery enabled forensic teams to gather DNA from the costume, but initially, there was no match. In 2016, a significant change in Michigan law permitted law enforcement to collect DNA from felony suspects without requiring a prior conviction. This legislative update helped authorities identify Daniel Clay as the source of the DNA on Bruck's costume. Clay was arrested and subsequently confessed to killing Bruck, though he claimed her death was accidental during consensual sex involving erotic asphyxiation. However, Monroe County prosecutor Michael Rohrig presented evidence that contradicted Clay's claim, showing that Bruck suffered blunt force trauma, not asphyxiation, as the cause of death. During the trial in May 2017, Rohrig described Bruck's facial injuries as consistent with a violent assault. He argued that after killing her, Clay abandoned her lifeless, unclothed body in the woods, likely believing he would never be connected to the crime. Clay admitted to being under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the party, and to offering Bruck a ride, but he insisted he had no intent to harm her. "I didn't mean for this to end like this," he told the court. Monroe Circuit Judge Daniel S. White dismissed Clay's apology as insincere, calling him a liar, an assaulter, and a killer. He cited Clay's repeatedly changing narrative designed to evade accountability, as detectives presented new evidence during the investigation. On May 16, 2017, after a 10-day trial, the jury found Daniel Clay guilty of first-degree murder. His conviction carried an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, prosecutor Rohrig acknowledged the relief felt by Bruck's family, who had endured a 31-month ordeal seeking justice. The fear of strangers can overshadow Halloween, but sometimes the darkest dangers come from the very people we're meant to trust. Up next is the story of Ronald Clark O'Brien's, which proves that betrayal and greed know no bounds. On Halloween night in 1974, Ronald O'Brien took his children, Timothy, 8, and Elizabeth, 5, trick-or-treating in Pasadena, Texas, along with their neighbor and his children. During the evening, O'Brien separated briefly from the group and later returned with 5 large pixie sticks, claiming they were given to him by a resident of a house that initially hadn't answered the door. He handed the candies to his 2 children, his neighbor's children, and 1 other child. Later that night, Timothy asked to eat some of his candy. He struggled to get the powder from the pixie sticks, so O'Brien helped him. After tasting it, Timothy complained of its bitter flavor. Moments later, he began vomiting and convulsing. Tragically, Timothy passed away on the way to the hospital. An autopsy revealed that his pixie sticks contained a fatal dose of cyanide, sparking intense fear in the community and leading to a police investigation. Initially, O'Brien denied knowing which house he got the pixie sticks from, but after multiple accounts, he pointed to a specific home. However, police found that the homeowner had been at work all evening, and further investigation turned suspicions toward O'Brien himself. Police discovered he was in significant debt and had taken out multiple life insurance policies on his children, adding $20,000 just weeks before Halloween. On the morning after Timothy's death, O'Brien shamelessly called his insurance agency to inquire about collecting on his son's policy. He also had recently visited a chemical supply store in search of cyanide. The remaining pixie sticks, retrieved from other children just in time, contained enough cyanide to kill multiple adults. In early 1975, Ronald O'Brien was arrested and charged with Timothy's murder, accused of lacing the pixie sticks with cyanide to claim insurance money. Convicted of capital murder, he was sentenced to death, earning the nickname the Candyman.